Good afternoon, everyone. It is 3 o'clock, and we are ready for our session, Successful Strategies for Supporting Your Program in the New Reality. I had the poll open asking you how you wanted this to go. Interestingly, the comments are saying you want a combo of the two, so that's what we're going to do. I'm very disappointed in the 4% of you that said I'm not Dr. Tim and you're in the wrong session. So I'm not sure how I feel about that one. Anyway, we're going to end the poll, and I'm going to try monitoring the chat while we're presenting at the same time. And so this is not a normal format for me in driving and presenting at the same time, but we're going to give it a whirl. So what I wanted us to be able to talk about this afternoon is really the strategies that you should consider in what the programs will look like as we come into the fall. I think it's, as we talked about this morning, there are some different configurations of the way that our schools are going to look. And I want to talk about those briefly, and we can talk about some strategies and then maybe bounce back and forth a little bit. But the first thing that we had talked about today really is the idea of changing the how, not the what, and not allowing people to use this as an opportunity to go, oh, well, we can only do our reading and math and language arts. That's all that we're going to focus on at this point in time. And that we're not going to worry about the specials, right? Specials can take the time off. We don't need the specials right now. We just need to focus on quote unquote core content. Well, we are core content. Music and arts education is a core content area. And like I said this morning, this is not really debatable. I mean, there are some people that would like to say that it's debatable, but it really isn't debatable. We are codified as a core subject in the vast majority of states. We're codified in federal legislation with the Every Student Succeeds Act, talking about music and arts education as being a part of a well-rounded education. Most states have learning expectations and standards in the visual performing arts. So I think it's really important to recognize that the work to determine what we teach in our schools has gone on for decades and has been a well-oiled, finely tuned process of developing standards and learning expectations for all of our students. And just because we find ourselves in a pandemic does not mean that gives us an excuse to throw everything out that we've already been doing and say we're going to reinvent everything. Because we don't need to reinvent everything. There's only one thing that we need to reinvent, and that's how we're delivering instruction. Okay, and that's why I keep hammering on this point: change the how, not the what. So along that way, Allison, specialists haven't been taught in my province since March 13th. We're being assured that we'll be allowed to teach again in the fall. You're absolutely right. I think that it's unfortunate they have that in Canada, that they haven't allowed you to provide instruction to students, because they need it now more than ever. And certainly, as we talked about this morning, and as we talked about yesterday in the SEL session that we did, our students have been through incredible amount of trauma. They will be out of the buildings at least 6 months when we reconvene. And so it's really going to be important that they be able to find their place to connect to, and that they're going to be able to find a way to express themselves. And I think that if we have proven anything over the past 2 months, and if we've learned anything over the past 2 months, is that we are able to do this, that we are able to provide meaningful music instruction in this type of format, recognizing that it's not ideal by any stretch of the imagination. But there are some things that we can do in this environment and do them pretty well, and actually do them very well. But as I mentioned this morning as well, there are just some things we can't do, and we can't play together. And that's the thing that our students miss. So it's important that in an environment where the choice is online or nothing, we go with online, right? And when the choice is online sometimes and in person sometimes, we take that. And when the choice is, okay, we get to be all together, but in a distance learning environment, then we figure out how to work around those guidelines. We are, as music educators, we are nothing if not adaptable. We are nothing if not showing an ability to improvise, right? And what this situation is calling for is for us to do some improvisation. Jason talked about the fact that the delivery in his school is varied from school to school. They teach students every week, and in other schools, music has been shut down. And again, I think that sometimes that's just because of a lack of knowledge by the administrator. I think originally when schools started to shut down, there was a lot of question about whether or not we could provide arts instruction. The assumption was, well, we just can't do that, by a lot of uninformed administrators. They just thought we can't do that. They didn't realize all the tools and resources that have been developed over the years and all of the support that was out there for us to be able to call upon to go, no, we got this. Give us a chance. You got to give us a chance to show you what we can do as music educators. Don't just assume that because of these challenges that are thrown in front of us, that we can't adapt, that we can't work with you, that we can't find a way to ensure that we can bring the gift of music education to our students who need it so desperately right now. So change the how, not the what. Remind everybody of music's place as a core subject. Shout it early, shout it often, shout it loud. I talked again today about the fact that we need to prepare for these multiple strategies: in-person, blended, in-person, online only, or remote only, and to be prepared for a second shutdown. Let's see, and here's one from Shana, I believe. I just received a message saying that our school will basically be split in half. Group A comes Monday, Friday, while Group B has online learning. Then the following week they switch. Absolutely. And that's something that we've seen variations of that model. And that's a blended learning model where, okay, we're going to teach, for a week, these students, and then the next group of students is going to come for the other week. And there's some interesting rationale behind that. And it's the same thing with students coming in for 2 days and then another group for 2 days. And then the fifth day is, everyone's online and teachers are doing professional development and other things. The idea of doing that split, that split day type of schedule, I'm not saying that right, the alternating day schedule, instead of some that we're talking about, well, we could have a group of students for half of the day and then have another group of students for the second half of the day. That model doesn't work because that compounds the problem of transportation. So transportation is already going to be a problem. So just think about it in terms of, okay, now we're going to make it so that we have to get all of the students to the school at some point in time during the school day. We have to clean the buses in between those rounds. We have to clean and scour the entire school between those rounds and all the materials and all the supplies, in order to get a second group of students into that building on the same day. Versus everyone's in for a day, and then they can clean and do everything else, and then a different group is in for the following day. It doesn't put the same strain on your transportation. It doesn't put the same strain on cleaning of the buildings. So when you're in this kind of blended learning, alternating day type of environment, for most districts, they're going to head that way just because of the economics. And I think that that's really something that we need to be aware of in our own planning. And I think along with that, there have been other schedules that I think that some other districts are looking at, where the big concern is around the younger students, right? The learning online, self-directed learning, which is, that we talk about SEL, self-directed learning takes a lot of self-awareness and self-control. And when you're talking about younger students, that's a different ball game. and trying to find a way to do meaningful instruction for younger grade students is very difficult. I mean, they need to be in the buildings more frequently than any of the other groups, just because of their maturity level, just because of where they are in the developmental process. So I think it's really important for some districts to take a look at how we treat different age levels. Now, some of the models that we've seen in that environment have included all the elementary school kids are in all the time. But what they do is they take over the middle school building along with the elementary school building. And then the high school building is used to rotate middle school and high school students in and out so that they have some face time. So elementary school students in buildings every day, high school students, middle school students in remote learning for the most part, but then do have some time, maybe 2 days a week in the building, and the high school students 2 days a week in the building, or alternating weeks like was talked about earlier. So again, it's not going to be one size fits all. And I think that's the most important thing to take away from all of this. Many of the things that I say may not be applicable to your environment, because you may be living in a community that's much different than our community. Actually, just before we went live, our governor announced that they are ending the stay-at-home order, so that we're now actually free to leave the house for the first time in 3 months, which is woohoo exciting. But everyone's in a little bit different place, and with how this is playing out. So I think that everything that I say is going to be in broad general terms, talking about the various models, but I believe that everyone will be in some sort of variant of the 3 models: in person with restrictions, blended where it's in person, online, and then remote learning either. So I'm seeing a couple questions here that have come in. So let me try to catch up to them. My biggest struggle, there's a new word. My biggest struggle is trying to formulate plans based on facts, is that the facts seem to be changing almost weekly. How do you keep up with changing facts? That's a really good point. And it is what I spend an awful lot of my time doing, is staying up on what is the latest information, what is the latest guidance that's coming out. We look at what is the guidance for the individual states. How is this state approaching it versus that state? The reality is there's not a plan for this. And the struggles that you're going through individually are the same struggles that our school administrators are going through. We've got a well-respected superintendent here in New Jersey that put together a list that started as 91 questions regarding how we were going to open our schools. A very respected superintendent. And he did 91 as a play on 19. So it was called like DVOC 91 instead of COVID-19. And he put those out about 2 weeks ago. And by the end of the first week, they were 182. And then the end of the next week, it was 273. And I actually think I'm going to drop those into the Google Drive that I set up for this morning's session. I'm going to drop that link in here for you as well. But they have a lot of the same questions. They have a lot of the same issues. And the things that I went over this morning, those are real. Those are real challenges that we're going through. I'm a sitting school board member in a large regional district here in central New Jersey. And this is not, I mean, these are real challenges. And lots of questions, and not a lot of answers from many people. So if you think that there's some Uber person somewhere that's figuring out, is going to come down with the tablets and going to go, this is the way, yeah, it ain't happening. It's not going to happen that way. And ultimately what's going to happen, it's going to be left up to the individual school districts to figure out a plan based on how your community is functioning and what guidance the health the health offices are saying for your community. Because as I mentioned again this morning, the health, safety, and wellness of our students is going to be the first and the primary issue that these decisions are going to be made on. So based on that, whatever the local guidance is, that's going to be used to inform your school administrators. But that's why I said earlier, this is not a time to go, well, we just can't do that. This is not a time to say, well, we can throw the learning standards out because we don't have to do that now. No, states have not, gotten rid of their learning requirements. And I'm on our state task force here that is working on reopening of schools. And everyone in meetings that I've been attending so far, and I've been in all of them, at the very first one I said, I want to make clear out of the gate that we are not making any alterations to our learning standards, that we're changing the way that we're delivering instruction, but we are not changing what the instructional expectations are. And everyone's head was moving up and down around the table. And I think that the same thing needs to happen in your own community. Focus on how you change the how and not the what. So Bobby, you talked about what are suggestions for teaching virtually or teaching equity when going virtual. So my question to you is it about teaching, I guess it's how you phrase the question, teaching equity. I'm assuming that you mean that not all students have the ability and access to the same materials and the same resources, and particularly when you look out over a large region. And that's a really, really big concern. I think one of the things that we learned from the outset, that a lot of our schools weren't prepared. A lot of schools weren't in a one-to-one computer environment, right? And in order for this to have a quick and successful transition, a lot of places were scrambling to figure out, how do we get Chromebooks to our students? How do we make sure they have what they need? First, it was the packets, all right? We're only going to be about 3 weeks, so let's make some packets and print them out and send them home, and we're good for 3 weeks. And then when spring break's over, this will all be done and we're coming back. Well, spring break was over and everyone's like, yeah, we're not coming back yet. So then the scramble was like, well, we can't keep printing packets. We need to get Chromebooks. So then everyone was scrambling to get Chromebooks. So I think that what's happened over the past 2 months has really shined a great big spotlight on what was already an educational inequity issue, and just made it that much brighter and that much louder for everyone to be forced to pay attention to. And as a result of that, I think that a lot of districts are taking the steps to make sure that those inequities don't exist as we move into the next phase of this. And I think that that's a lot of what you're seeing now. I think there's also a lot of concern in some of our communities where in some districts you had 30-40% of the students that hadn't logged on since they were out of school. And so how do they reach out to those students and people going in and making sure those students are okay and that they have that they have the things that they need to be able to learn. So it's not a simple answer by any stretch of the imagination, but it is something that everyone is is certainly keenly aware of. And I know in the state plans that I've been looking at and the one that we're working on for the state of New Jersey, that is something that they're attempting to hit head on. Technology is almost non-existent. If they do have access to technology, they have to share one computer with brothers or sisters. And I understand that, Jamie. And that's why I think many of the districts, what they're working to do is try to find a way to have, at least at the middle and high school level, one-to-one Chromebook type of setups, and then working in more traditional models in some of the elementary schools. Megan says, I have a hard time when students tell me that they are just going to do running start online at the local college instead of high school classes. If it's going to be online, how do you convince them to stick with music and have patience? Well, I think, again, it depends on your opening. It sounds like for you, Megan, that you're looking at maybe that the high school is going to be starting back online. And so instead, the students are choosing to possibly go to college classes. I think you try to remind them why they were in the music class to begin with. And sometimes that's the piece that is the hardest to or maybe not the hardest, the easiest for some students to lose sight of. And I think, and a lot of that stems from the fact of not being able to play together. That's why I said it this morning. That's the thing that our students miss the most. And so for students, if you're coming back in an online setting, I think the thing that you've got to focus on is that this is just the start. This is just to get us started. And this is so we can get back to the point where we play together. And so we're going to work on some really interesting things. And then the other piece of it that I think is going to be really important is give them a voice, give them a say in how they can be involved in what they want to work on. Make it so that if you provide them with an opportunity to have some voice in the choices that are being made, that may bring them back at the table. You want to work on a new tune with a couple of your friends and do it online? Have at it. I'll support you. Here are some resources. Here are some tools. But don't, I would certainly encourage you to consider looking at ways to engage them at that level. Deb, she's from New Jersey. Governor Murphy says he expects the limit to be raised to 250 people on June 22nd and 500 people on July 3rd. School district planning graduations should prepare for 500-person limit to be in place by the time graduations can resume on July the 6th. Yes, that's obviously graduations in any of our states have been one of the points of contention, and rightfully so for students that want to have that opportunity. I can tell you what we're doing with our students, regardless of what the number is, and we've got a graduating class of almost 500 students. What we're going to do is we're going to find a way that if that's the 500 is the cap, we're going to bring in students and the staff needed to support the event so that our graduating class can be together. No parents, no visitors, no nothing. If we go that direction, the priority is going to be on the students being able to be together for their graduation one last time. So I think it's interesting to see how those things will play out. I'm scurrying along a bit. Dr. Tim quotes that when you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Paula Kreider's first session was a great example. Paula, always well planned. It wound up being the best session ever because of her being present. We will struggle through this together. Yeah, there we go. Thank you. I didn't see that one coming. And that's the thing that I was trying to talk about this morning and why we put some of the resources out there. We have to plan. We've got to make a plan for how we move some things forward. The demands and descriptions of expectations of our jobs change, sometimes daily. Yes, that's right. And that's going to continue to roll. Again, and I think to a certain degree, you got to cut your administrators some slack because they're trying to figure it out too. They really are. They're meeting. They've got these groups together. But that's why I suggested this morning that you meet with your administrators and go in and have a conversation with them to see how you can be part of the solution, right? And how you can use the information that you're gleaning from here and that you're gleaning from online and that you're gleaning from the other associations who are putting out tremendous information to help your administrators understand how you can move your courses forward together. With news coming out yesterday from the WHO about asymptomatic people not transferring the virus, I think that may ease some potential restrictions. Maybe. Well, it may reduce some of them, but we're still hearing about these hotspots where students gathered recently here in New Jersey a couple of weeks ago for a small graduation gathering. And 11 of the students that were there ended up coming down with COVID. So we don't know why, but again, bringing people together seems to lead to more cases of COVID. So I think that restrictions that we're seeing and that people are recommending around social distancing and limited class sizes, those are real. And I would expect that, in any environment, social distancing, masks for older students, and smaller class sizes are going to be a legitimate thing. Now, what is the distance of social distancing? Is it going to be 6 feet? Is it going to be 10 feet for instrumentalists? Could it be something smaller with masks? Those are the debates that are going now, and every state seems to be a little bit different. But the class sizes are definitely smaller, and I think that we need to prepare for that, and we need to think about that as well. And I think that we also have to be mindful of the COVID research that is out there. I put actually before this session, I'm getting information all the time throughout the course of the day, and I keep sliding the documents into my secret stash that I made available to you all. There was an article in Wired magazine talking about the attempts to get orchestras back together, and they actually quote from the lead researcher of the COVID study for cbDNA and the National Federation of High School Associations, talking about the fact that you have to be careful because some of the research that's been done has been focused on the droplets, but the research that we're looking at right now that cbDNA is doing with the National Federation of High Schools, as well as 83 other organizations, and I'm proud of the fact that both my organization and I personally have supported that research study, because it's the aerosolization that's the problem. And we really have to know to what degree, is that a problem? What is the disbursement of those aerosols when somebody is playing a musical instrument? Now, I think some of the not preliminary studies, but some of the side studies that we've seen pop up around the country and around the world is giving some hope that it doesn't seem like the aerosolization is spreading at the same frequency that it has shown to spread as it relates to our choirs and our vocal programs. But this study is going to give us an idea of what is that aerosolization spread, and they're also doing the same thing for vocal music, so that we can really have an understanding about what is the dangers from singing beyond just the instances that we've had of the choirs where people have gotten sick and unfortunately died. Again, it's all about how we can bring our students back safely. And these research studies are going to be really critical components for how you can then go to your administration and say, look, they've done this study. It shows that the aerosolization may not be as profound as people had originally thought. And oh, by the way, they've developed some mitigation strategies on ways that that can be reduced so that we can safely play together. And I'm pretty confident that we're going to be able to play together our instruments. Whether there's greater spacing that's involved, or whether or not there needs to be some mitigation efforts, maybe some sort of not plexiglass, but a mylar screen that can be attached to a music stand that would create a barrier between students that would be affordable and a way to go. I know that they're going to be testing these things as part of the mitigation research on this, and that will hopefully provide us with some clarity and for some comfort on how we come back together. So stay tuned, and again, I think that this information is changing daily, and I know that everyone is committed to trying to push out this information through all the various channels that we're using. Someone reminded me that I'm talking about a link, and we're kind of 2/3 of the way through, and shame on me for not sharing it. So I'm going to share the link. So this is to my secret stash of resources. And with that secret stash of resources, again, that's where I'm putting all sorts of stuff. So we've got the state reopening guidelines. As soon as the state releases something, it goes in there. I've got guidelines that some states have put out regarding arts education. We're doing something similar here in New Jersey. So those are in there. The United Kingdom just released their opening guidelines yesterday. We put that in there. We've got the various research studies and the abstract for the COVID study that is going on at the University of Colorado that I mentioned earlier for the cbDNA and the National Federation of High Schools. So that's in there. Advocacy resources are there. Additional resources that we put in there include a lot of the information on the social emotional learning and tools that you can use, and advocacy materials to advocate about social emotional learning. So I think that those resources are there specifically for you to make life better. And so actually, so that you can see the same things that we're seeing. I mean, this is the information that we're consuming as we're trying to come up with plans and strategies, and how do we address these issues with administrators, across the country. And you'll certainly hear more about that this evening. Jody, you're back in Australia. That's great to hear. And again, and I know in Australia, they're back. You're all the way back. If I'm not mistaken, I think you're back, and it's almost like you're back without even maybe any social distancing. You can throw in the chat if I'm wrong on that, but we'd love to hear what you learn as you're going on. So let's see. So what if days are split? We meet students half-time. How do we complete all of the curriculum? Mark, again, we've got to improvise. We got to look at it from the standpoint on if the days are split and you meet with half the students at one time and half the students at another time, there's still stuff that the students can do online. And we talked about this a little bit this morning. Focus on the things that you can do in the virtual environment. What are the things that you can do and you can do well? You can assign them music that they can work on, their individual parts at home. You can provide other research projects regarding the piece of music that you're working on. Or there's things that you can do from, sight singing examples, or theory, or additional programs that you can utilize to engage them in meeting other aspects of our music standards. And then you save when you're together for the things that you can't do when you're online or virtual or remote. And that's where I come in and saying, when you're together, play, because that's the thing that they miss. And you're not going to be able to have everyone all together playing at the same time. But if you can have 10 guys and gals together playing, bring them together, let them play. If it's a quartet, it's a quartet. If it's 8, if it's 12, it's 15, whatever it is, bring them together, let them play. That's what they miss. So let me keep going here, see any of the questions. How would you handle students and families who don't believe that safety is a concern and ultimately won't follow safety precautions because districts like mine say they are suggestions and not requirements? Well, Ryan, I think that it's interesting that there's suggestions. I know that the state is making the suggestions to the districts. What the districts put in place should be district requirements. So, and there's some wiggle room about it, particularly around masks and young children. And I think that that's something that people, are concerned about. Rightfully so, but our older students and our older faculty members, they need to be protected. And look, the issue about masks and students is not so much that there's a lot of as much concern around the students, it's the concern for our older faculty members. And that's the whole idea of making sure we have these protocols in place. So I'm surprised that a district would say, oh, we're just recommending this. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. I know in our district that wouldn't fly. If we need to make sure that safety and security of our students, faculty, and staff comes first, then whatever we need to do to protect them, those will become requirements. So I'm just surprised that they're taking that particular approach. Don't know what else I could tell you about that. How do we start beginners virtually? Yes, that is a great topic. We could do a whole session on starting beginners virtually. And the great news is a lot of really smart people have been working on this. And a lot of the top bandmasters in the United States have been looking on how do we start beginners. And there's been a lot of different ideas that have been tossed around. And I'm not going to necessarily say that one is better than the other. But there are a couple different variations. First of all, utilizing videos. There are some videos that have been put together from various organizations to talk about things like, how do you put the instrument together? How do you change a reed? How do you change a string on an instrument? For the clarinet, how do you put the darn thing together, right? You got 5 pieces trying to figure out. I'm a drummer. I wouldn't know which end goes on which end. So having those videos certainly helps. Also, when you in the initial stages, you're probably going to want to have meetings virtually where you can bring sectional groups together at some point in time, even if you have to do it as an after school, quote unquote, opportunity where you can meet. Okay, we're all going to meet with our clarinets. How are we doing? Can you figure out how to put it together? Jimmy, you need to know, you need to turn it. The F key's got to go over this direction. So there are ways to get it and to get through on some of those things. And there, you'll have some students that'll work for and others that won't. And then you're going to need to concentrate on, okay, how do I help this particular student who's struggling to get a sound? And that's going to mean how do you use the video camera to try to isolate what the problem may be. And I know that it's not perfect, but it's better than not having a strategy for them to start. Now, there have been some people that say, hey, we're not going to start beginners until we're back together. I'm not sure that that's the great approach. I happen to be married to a music educator who teaches 3rd grade recorder, 4th grade beginning band, 5th grade band. And she's been doing the process of recruiting all of her students for next year and been looking at what are some of the strategies for starting new students. So I'm living with it as she's teaching at our kitchen table right now. But one of the other things that I've heard about, and I think this is in one of the documents in my secret stash, I think it came from the CBDNA guidance for reopening schools, or it might be the high school band director's guidance, where they talk about only starting some selected instruments. So maybe focusing on 5 instruments and not necessarily starting more complicated instruments. So not really starting, okay, we're not going to start our French horns right now. And really focusing on, okay, we can do a trumpet, okay, we can do a baritone, we can do a flute, we'll do clarinet. And even starting kids who would start on saxophone, starting them on clarinet and wait for starting them on saxophone until they come back together. So that's another approach. Again, I'm not advocating for any of them, but I'm just letting you know that with all the resources and guidance that people are coming out with, there's a lot of great information. I do know, if I can find this one document real quick and just look it up. I do know that some of the guidance that's going to be coming out from the National Federation of High Schools also is addressing the beginning instrumental demonstration and fittings, looking at what's the right way to do this, with students. So I think that there's going to be some great guidance that comes in from them on ways to assist with it. And we also know that some of the companies have these demonstration kits that are available, that if you can get individual kits to individual students, that may be a way for them to try out and demo something based on mouthpieces that are theirs versus, trying it out on instruments in schools. So that's some of the ways that people are doing. But, I'm not an expert on this, but again, in my secret stash, I'm putting all the documents. And by the way, that's not just the stash for today. That's the stash that I'm going to keep filling up every day, so that you have access to the information. Let's see. Had a problem with kids would work instead of coming to class, and the parents were not helping get the kids online. Yeah, we've had some of that. And I think that, as we've ended this year, a lot of people have been more forgiving about, okay, let's not make this, a big deal. This has been hard for everyone. Let's kind of work our way through and get it to the other side. I think that expectations and accountability are going to have to change when we come back in the fall, regardless of what your particular school district may look like at that point in time. So by thinking through with the administration on the fact that there's got to be a way to hold our students accountable in this new environment that we're going to go into, I think that that's going to have to replace the environment that we've been in, where it's just been, okay, well, we don't want to rock the boat. We understand that things are difficult for them. Now we have a time to plan. Now people know what to expect. And I think that there should be greater accountability for students to show up and do the work. In whatever the environment is, it doesn't give them permission not to do the work. Have you heard much about cohort scheduling? That would create a huge change in how our programs can function moving forward. No, Tony, I haven't, but if you want to send me a Facebook message or email me what it is you're talking about in more detail, I'd be happy to talk, so learn about it. I'd love to learn about it, A, because I haven't heard about that. And then B, see if there's something I can do to help you or connect you to somebody that can. Our school administration sent us a half-day schedule for the fall, just like you said, won't work. We're a small K-8, 250 students. In the schedule, they have music band, choir classes only once a week for 25 minutes. Do I try to advocate for more time or be happy that they didn't completely cut the program? I would see if there's a way to get more time. I'm surprised that they're going to a half day, and I would assume that half day one group of students and half day another. I don't see how that's feasible from a transportation cost standpoint. But if they're doing it, see if there's a way to advocate for more time, or see if you can suggest some blended opportunities that you could include along with the time, so that when you have them for that limited time, that's what you have them for, but then you give them additional work and materials that they can do on their own. Do you foresee that the fall benchmark results are going to show a lack of learning time because of the blended theme? Janet, I don't know. They're talking about learning loss, and having to, again, remediation, trying to make up for the fact that there has, and it really hasn't been learning loss, right? It's been learning delayed. They just didn't learn as much as they would have if they would have necessarily been in their normal school. So I don't know whether or not there's going to be, any fall benchmarks that will show a lack of teaching because of the blended learning theme, because we really haven't been in a blended learning theme yet. We've only been, at least most of us, we've only been remote. So I think what we'll learn in the fall is what's the impact of remote been, and then what we'll learn in the spring is what's the impact of others. Some people don't have the Google Drive yet. My offer is still sitting up there. It says, if you go under offers, Bob's Secret Stash, get them here. I want to make sure that you have them. If you don't have them, I'm sorry. And I have posted it in the CSI Facebook group, and I'll post it there again for folks. I'm going to try to quickly get through some of these questions. What's the best to motivate leaders who are worn out by all the changes? Yeah, keep it positive. We can do this. Yes, it's challenging. It's challenging for all of us, but there is a way that we can do this. And if you go in as a helper, they're going to value that. If you're coming in, there's enough people coming out and, well, we can't do this. So that doesn't make any sense. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. What's wrong with you? Right? They're getting enough of that. Go in and, how can I help you? How can I work on solutions? How can we work together? What do you need me to do? Be a helper, right? I think that's one of the things that you can do for your administration. Most studies say 6 feet apart, but my colleagues read in Texas 10 feet apart is recommended. Remains to be seen. That's what they're starting with in Texas, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything. They're reacting to some of the research that came out of Germany, and we think that the new COVID studies are going to provide us with some clarity. To me, it seems like the flutes is one of the instruments that would clearly present a real threat, a clear and present danger from flautists. Boy, there's a joke in there as a drummer that I'm just going to leave right there. But yes, that's one of the things that they're studying in this aerosol study, is to what degree is our flutes potentially super spreaders? We don't know. But we've also already seen some devices that have come out that have been remediation. The cbDNA study has not been completed. It just started last week. We expect to have some preliminary findings on that prior to the end of the month, with more complete findings by the middle of July. And I recognize the timing is not ideal, but it's as fast as they could stand up a legitimate scientific research study that we will be able to hang our hats on when the results come out. So I know they're working closely with that. A lot of places across the world are opening schools. And I think that we can look to them to see what they're doing with masks and social distancing and desks and playing. And just like our friend in Australia and some of our friends in the Netherlands, we need to look to them for what is working for them. Lynn, you wanted to know about how much time between individual usage of practice rooms. It's going to depend on how the practice room is ventilated. That's going to be the key. If the practice room is well ventilated, then you should be able to do a quick wipe down and then be able to move into additional students. If you have no ventilation or poor ventilation, you may have to leave that room empty for a period of time. But I'm not an expert in that area, but I do know the answer to that question is all tied to how well the room is ventilated. Would you like any new state information for your stash? Absolutely. Send it over to me. My email address is bob@artsedresearch.org, ARTSED research.org. Send me an email, send me your stash, and I'll put it in there. Yes, I saw Indiana's. We have it in our stash, Tom. Thank you very much. But even if you think we've seen something, send it to us anyway. Because chances are they aren't. Somebody emailed me something the other day. Well, I'm sure you've seen this from North Carolina. I'm like, you know what? Didn't see that. And we were able to get it up in the dash. Deborah, Zezwitz Music. Yay. Shout out to Zezwitz. I worked with Zezwitz. I didn't work with them. I rented a trumpet when I was in elementary school from Zezwitz. So I'm a fan of them. They have instrument videos. You know what? I could keep going. I would love to keep going with you all. Let me just see if I can quickly grab a couple more of these. Concerned about closing the gap with my beginners. Yeah, I hear you. My wife has been going through the same thing. She's just tried to find little things for them to play and send her recordings on. And so I would encourage you to do that. And there's one thing I want to share with you before we go, because I thought this was brilliant. I was in the Massachusetts Music Educators. They had an advocates forum last week. I think they meet every week. And they break into their different groups and they're talking about strategies that they're using. And one of the music educators, and I meant to give her a shout out this afternoon, and her name just went racing out of my head. She put together a recital for her students. And it was basically a memoji recital so that students could make a recording. They didn't do a video, they would do an audio recording. And then when they send it in, they would send it with their memoji. And then she put it up online for the students so they could listen to each student playing something. And she got more participation because it was audio, not video. And also because the students weren't putting themselves up. They could send an emoji in, they could send up their own memoji or a superhero, whatever graphic they wanted to do. So they were able to do it anonymously. And she got such great participation. I thought that was such a wonderful way to engage students. And that's the one thing that I want to say about all of this is the fact that our educators around the country are being very creative, very inventive. And I think that we can look to each other for the solutions that we're going through. And I urge you to engage in some of these, the Facebook groups that are out there. Elisa's Facebook group is fabulous. So I would certainly encourage you to join that one. Music educators creating online together, all these great information that's being shared, all the different Google Music rooms that are being put up. That have been created in Google Slides have been very inspirational. I'm so inspired by the creativity and innovation of our educators who are just like, pandemic? Yeah, get away from me. I can take care of this. They roll up their sleeves, dig in, and move forward. And that's the message here. We've got to find a way to move forward. And as I've told you this morning, in everything that we've learned and everything that we've ever done, we've always found a way to move forward. We've always found a way to move forward better than we have in the past. But the way that we've been able to do it, and the thing that has made us successful in doing it, is that we've always done it together. And I would encourage you to keep that spirit in mind as you go forth and continue with the rest of your sessions here at Conn-Selmer Institute Connect. And thank you for spending a little bit of your afternoon with me in this discussion. And again, if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me on Facebook. Feel free to send me an email. I'll also post the link again up to the Facebook group. So if you've had a problem finding it, you can get it there. So otherwise, thank you all and have a fantastic day.